Just what role do disease-specific prescription diets play when it comes to treating your pet with a certain condition? Well, that's what I'm going to be talking about today as I answer a question from a lady who has a Labrador just been diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy, so that's a form of heart failure, and she's wondering, actually, is this the best thing that she can be feeding her dog, or is there a better home-cooked option? But before I get into that, here's the intro.
Welcome to Call the Vet, the show that answers all your dog and cat questions so they can live healthier, happier lives. And here's your host, veterinarian Dr. Alex Avery.
Hi, and welcome to the 33rd episode of the Call the Vet show. So I'm Dr. Alex, and I'm the veterinarian behind ourpetshealth.com. And my aim on these podcasts is to answer any questions you have about how to look after your dog or your cat to the best of your ability. I even had a rabbit question last show. So whatever it is, no matter what you're wondering about, if it's just how to look after them to the best of your ability, if it's how to prevent them from becoming sick in the first place, how to keep them as healthy as possible, or if they are unwell and you've got some decisions to make about how their care should look like, then just get in touch. Go to callthevet.org and you can submit your question there. Also, if you do enjoy these shows and you're interested in hearing more, then make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And if you are a fan, I'd appreciate it so much if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this podcast, because it really helps more than you can imagine with other people discovering this podcast, with it surfacing in search results and that kind of thing, and that allows me to help more pet owners, which is what I'm all about. But now that intro's out the way, let's get into today's question.
Get your questions answered at callthevet.org.
And today's question is from Susan, who writes that her 9-year-old lab has just been diagnosed with DCM, so that's dilated cardiomyopathy, and now is on Royal Canin early cardiac formula. I hate that he has to be on over-processed kibble, especially after doing so well on dehydrated raw, because he doesn't suffer from bloody mucousy poops anymore. And so she's asking, is raw diet really bad for his DCM issues, or is it that because vets are usually sponsored by big kibble companies, which she writes in capital letters, and have to prescribe them? And then the second question, or second part of the question, is Susan wanted to know if she can make a home-cooked diet that is balanced with all the nutrients and amino acids like taurine that can be equally as effective in controlling his DCM. So I'm going to start off my answer to this question by saying that I don't really know where the myth comes from that vets are sponsored and paid off by pet food companies to sell their products unnecessarily, and that all vets kind of push these unnecessary diets on our patients. So yes, pet food companies, they will sponsor events, they'll sponsor kind of big conferences and that kind of thing. But you know, I've never received any money from a pet food company to sell their products. I've never been paid to push one product, one food over another food. And I'm not aware of any other vet who has. It certainly would be unethical if that was, that was the case and there wasn't a clinical reason for prescribing these diets. Now, we do, as vets, make money from selling products. That shouldn't come as a surprise to you. There is a markup on food. There's a markup on drugs. There's a markup on accessories, on, food bowls, on whatever it is that's being sold in the veterinary clinic, on leads, on collars. But that's the same as any retail shop. So we'll get our stores or our stock from a supplier. That will then be marked up and then that will be sold on. But that's the same, like I say, in any shop. So that shouldn't come as a surprise to you. And in actual fact, the markup on food is typically very low. So there's not a huge amount of money that's been made. Now, you could say, well, in the long term, because that food is something that needs to be bought again and again and again, then, there's certainly a benefit in selling that. And, no one would say that there's no money to be made. But I don't know where this myth comes from that vets are just paid off to push these foods and push their diets. We prescribe these diets in those patients that really need them, or we're advising a particular food because we believe it's a good quality food. We believe that it is the best thing to feed your pet. So that's where that recommendation comes from. There's a whole load of myths. There's a whole load of kind of misinformation about diets in particular online, and it can actually be very difficult to find good information because we tend to get polarized views. So you'll tend to, if we're taking raw food for an example, you'll tend to have the avid raw feeders who say that any kind of any cooked commercial diet, and any kibble in particular, is the source of all disease from that your pet is suffering from. That if you feed them on a raw diet, it will go away. And I've certainly read that. And if you look for any condition, the treatment, you're probably going to find someone to suggest that you switch to feeding raw and your problem will go away. But then on the other hand, you've got people who will say that raw is absolutely the wrong thing. It's incredibly harmful. It's really dangerous. It's very irresponsible. And basically you get these two camps kind of shouting at each other with no middle ground being made, no compromise, if you like, or no recognition that actually it's kind of quite a grey area rather than a black and white topic. So really, we prescribe prescription diets, and they're called prescription diets because we are using them to treat specific conditions. They don't need a prescription as such. You don't need to have your vet write you a prescription to buy one of these diets, but they're called prescription diets because we only use them to treat specific conditions. They're not something that we would recommend to be fed to any pet that isn't suffering from that disease. Now, that's not to say that there's any harm in that necessarily, and most of them are absolutely completely balanced diets that would be appropriate to feed pretty much every animal. There's exceptions to that, especially growing puppies. Prescription diets are often not appropriate for that, but in a general adult healthy dog, they would typically do fine on any prescription diet. But we're not recommending that because these diets are a little bit more expensive, because there's a lot more gone into them, a lot more research that's gone into them. And this is the big thing. There is generally very good evidence supporting the use of these diets. Now, that might not be the case in every diet, but in the vast majority, there is really good evidence that these diets will improve quality of life. They'll improve quantity of life. They'll maybe reduce severity of the disease. They'll reduce the frequency of flare-ups. So I'm thinking here like kidney diets, some skin diets, weight loss diets, urinary disease diets, joint support diets, or arthritis diets. There's a lot of evidence that these diets are incredibly good at reducing the symptoms, improving comfort, improving life expectancy compared to dogs or cats that are fed a normal kind of bog standard, if you like, maintenance diet. So I don't have to prescribe them if I don't feel that they're appropriate, and I certainly don't prescribe them if I don't feel that they're appropriate. But for a lot of cases, actually, they make a really valuable addition to any treatment plan. Now, there's going to be other things involved with the plan. Typically, there may be other treatments that's needed. So, for example, in a dog with DCM, so dilated cardiomyopathy, like Susan's dog, then typically something like vetmedin might be given. So that's pemabendan, maybe furosemide, Diarin is the trade name, may be given as well. So it depends on kind of where along the kind of the pathway of disease that dog is suffering from. Are they preclinical, so not actually suffering from heart failure directly, or are they in heart failure and needing additional treatments? And again, there may be other treatments that are appropriate for this dog based on everything that's going on. So diets, they do play a role. They're very important in a lot of conditions, and they can make a big difference. Now, if we're talking about raw versus kibble in general, is raw diets really bad for his DCM issues? Now, the thing with raw diets is there's actually really very little evidence that they make that they make any difference at all, that there's any benefits at all with them. There's a lot of claimed benefits, but actually if you try and find feeding studies and things like that, they're just not available yet. Now, I hope and I'm sure that will come in the future, and it may well be that in the future we do know that feeding a particular raw diet is beneficial to a dog or a cat with a particular health condition, or just in general, and that's the best thing that we can feed them. But there's just none of that information. We're dealing completely with anecdotes, so that's people's stories about their dog doing well on raw food. Equally, I've certainly read plenty of stories about dogs doing badly on raw food. So what often happens is that people who like to feed raw food, they focus on the positive reports and they don't consider the negative. So that's just a natural effect. It's called confirmation bias, that we just look for things that agree with us. So in my mind, there's actually no real proven benefits to feeding a raw food. Now, there is some negative. So there's an infection risk, and that's particularly important to consider if you've got young children, if you've got elderly people, or if you've got immunocompromised people in the house, because there's the infection risk as well as being to your pet, it's also to ourselves. Now, if you're a normal healthy adult who's preparing the food just as you would prepare your own kind of raw food, then the likelihood is you can mitigate those risks and it's not too important. It's something to be aware of, but it's not something to worry about. But if you're in a higher risk situation, then you really do need to think twice about that. Equally, commercial diets, they do pose some risk, especially if there's a manufacturing error. So that's been seen in the recent vitamin D toxicity recall from some Hills food and other food at the start of the year. Or if there's a formulation issue that maybe was unexpected. And an example of that is the grain-free diets potentially causing heart failure warning that has, again, been happening kind of over the last 12 months or so. So it's really important that we think about what we're feeding our pet. Clearly, good diet is a major source of health in general. But we also need to be aware of all the risks and actually the evidence behind any benefit. Now, it's like I say, it's a huge topic. I've actually written a complete guide on this. And if you're interested in that free ebook, if you go to ourpetshealth.com/raw diet guide, you can download that ebook. It's about 10,000 words or something. So it's a pretty comprehensive guide that will kind of talk you through whether that's something that you should be considering or maybe it's something that you want to, have second thoughts about and feed something different instead. Now, as for feeding for a disease, the same thing goes. There's absolutely no evidence that raw feeding for heart failure in this case or for any other disease is beneficial. Now, that's not to say it's worse, but we just have no evidence behind it. So I think it would be remiss of me to say, absolutely, you can try feeding raw when I know there is a diet that has got evidence behind it that will improve the health of your pet with that disease. So in one situation, we would be speculating, say, well, maybe raw would be better. Who knows? Why don't you give it a go? I don't think that's really appropriate if I know that there's something else you could be feeding your pet that has got a proven benefit behind it. So that's definitely something to consider. And then if we're thinking about home cooked recipes, so home cooked recipes is something that, is maybe going to be the best thing for certain conditions. So I'm thinking dietary allergies, that kind of thing. And there may be other reasons that we want to home cook her food. Now, these are really difficult to be balanced, to be formulated, to be made so that they're actually balanced in general, even if we're just dealing with a healthy animal. And in my mind, if we're looking for a home cooked recipe, really they should be something that's formulated by a registered nutritional specialist. They're going to be able to formulate a diet that's completely balanced, as well as meeting the needs of your particular pet based on their history, their body condition, the diseases that they're suffering from. And really, making a balanced diet is hard, and making one that could help control a disease process is going to be even harder. So it's actually very easy to do more harm than good if you are just, kind of Googling a home-cooked recipe or trying to make up a home-cooked recipe yourself, because there have been studies that have shown that even if you're varying that recipe to try and make it balanced, the chances are that you're not going to be providing all of the nutrients that your dog will need. So again, if your dog or your cat is unwell, then generally, I don't think a home-cooked recipe is going to be the best thing, with the caveat that if you are going down this route, then it should be formulated and you should be kind of in contact with a registered nutritional specialist to do that formulation for you and to provide you with a kind of a feeding menu, if you like, for your pet. So that's my thoughts on this condition. So I guess it's not specifically about, the early Canin early cardiac formula, the Royal Canin early cardiac formula, but about prescription diets in general and about feeding your pet kind of raw versus kibble versus commercial food versus home cooked food as well. So there's a lot behind that. Equally, I'm a big believer that if you are aware of all of these issues, then you are absolutely in your right to make up your own mind about what's best for your dog. That's absolutely fine. But I'm a big believer that these aren't black and white topics, as is so often put out online, in podcasts in this case, in videos on YouTube and what have you. Really, there's lots of shades of grey, and there's no such thing as a no-risk situation. That's the same when we're medicating our pet, when we're going for surgery, as well as when we're feeding our pet. So if you're aware of all of the potential risks and all of the potential benefits and the evidence behind those, then you're going to be in a much better position to make an informed decision that's right for you and that's right for your pet. So remember, you can check out that raw versus kibble ebook at ourpetshealth.com/raw diet guide for more information about this subject. So I hope that answered your question, Susan. I hope it gave all of you food for thought about, what the best thing to feed your pet might be. I'd really love to hear your thoughts as well on this topic. I know it's a really emotional topic and an emotive topic. So if you just head over to the show notes and leave me a comment, what are you feeding your pet? Why have you made that decision? And how's your pet done on that diet? Have you noticed any changes since maybe you changed their diet from one thing to another? I'd really love to hear your thoughts and opinions on this topic. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about today, and that I meant to mention in the intro but forgot, was that as you're no doubt be aware, I've kind of changed the format of this show slightly. So rather than answer multiple questions every week, I'm just going to be answering one question every episode. So that will just allow you to kind of pick and choose which ones you want to listen to. Maybe there's others that you're not so interested in that topic, and it means that you're not kind of wasting your time, if you like, kind of listening to something that you're not particularly interested in. So, I'm really conscious that we're all pushed for time, and I personally find listening to long podcasts, really challenging. I've got a limited amount of time. I tend to listen to podcasts in my car, which is probably where most of you are listening to this. So, depending on what you're doing, time is valuable. But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the format. Let me know. You can find me over on Twitter or Instagram, and my handle is @OurPetsHealth, or you can hit me up on Facebook, and my page is Our Pets Health TV. So I'd love to see you over there. Say hi and let me know your thoughts on the format of this show. Also, remember to subscribe so you don't miss out on all of the future questions. And I'm going to be trying to release anyway a couple of questions every week, so the days might change around a bit as I kind of find the best format that suits me and my schedule, and kind of spreads things out a little bit. So I'm thinking maybe releasing on Monday and Thursday. That might change, but if you're subscribed, you're going to get an update when I release a new question anyway. And also, if you do enjoy these podcast episodes, please remember to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this show as well. It helps more than you can imagine with other people finding these podcasts, and allows me to help more pets, which is really what my mission is. So anyway, that's it from me. I'm Dr. Alex. This is the Call the Vet show. And until next time, take care.
You've been listening to Call the Vet. Be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode of the show that answers all of your pet questions.